We're really digging into a key moment in British politics. We've got this stack of sources, all focus on one thing: Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer's Labour Party conference speech. And his team, well, they called it his clearest statement yet of his political creed. Pretty high stakes.
Absolutely. And our job for you today is to, cut through some of the immediate noise. We need to unpack what this speech actually says, this big vision he tried to outline, centered on this idea that Britain's at a fork in the road. And crucially, we need to look at the context, the immense political pressures inside and outside the party that were swirling around him as he gave it.
Right. Because what really struck me from the sources is how deliberate this confrontation feels. He seems to be trying to frame the whole future around a choice, mainly between Labour and Reform UK, defining the path forward by sort of defining his opponents. Okay, so this vision, it's ambitious isn't quite the word. He talked about a fight for the soul of our country. But the phrase that really landed, the one everyone picked up on, was comparing the task ahead to rebuilding Britain after the war. I mean, that's a massive historical claim to make right now.
It really is, and it's clearly intentional. A risky move, rhetorically speaking. He's not just aiming for an election win here. He's trying to reshape the whole political conversation. Invoking the post-war spirit, well, it elevates everything beyond just policy tweaks. It's about national necessity. It's almost like asking for the kind of historical mandate Clement Attlee had back in '45.
But hang on, comparing now to post-World War II, I mean, is that really credible? Doesn't that risk sounding, well, a bit overblown to people just living their daily lives? Without the backdrop of actual war damage.
Yeah, that's the big challenge, isn't it? But it serves a purpose, strategically. It feels like he's trying to get ahead of criticism maybe for unpopular choices later on. If you frame things with that sort of wartime or post-war urgency, it suggests shared sacrifice is needed. Makes tough decisions, like tax hikes or spending cuts, seem almost unavoidable, not just ideological.
Okay. So it's a framing device as much as anything.
Exactly. And then he laid out the two paths very clearly for you, the listener. Path one, Labour's path, is framed as renewal or decline. It's presented as the choice of decency, aiming to grow the economy from the grassroots. The goal being money in the pockets of working people, better living standards.
And path two. That's where Reform UK comes squarely into focus.
Precisely. The alternative path, according to Starmer, is the path of division, succumbing to what he called the politics of grievance. So he's painting Reform UK as focused on, let's say, cultural battles and looking backwards, rather than offering positive future solutions. He's making the style and temperament of his opponents part of the choice itself.
And that nod to Attlee, the post-war thing, it wasn't just talk, was it? Attlee's government built new towns. And the sources say Labour just committed, over the weekend, to start building 3 new towns in England pretty quickly, before the end of the decade.
Right. It connects that grand historical narrative to something very concrete. Housing, which is, a huge issue for so many people right now. It's his way of saying, look, we get the scale of the problem, and we're ready for big state action, maybe on a scale we haven't seen in generations.
But, and this is a big but, Starmer himself put a massive caveat on this renewal idea, a dose of reality. He said very explicitly the road is long, it's difficult,
Yeah.
and it needs decisions that are not cost-free or easy. He even said some would be uncomfortable for our party. That's quite an admission.
It really is, and you have to ask, why would a leader trying to build support talk so much about discomfort right away? It seems directly linked to the financial reality that's coming through in these sources.
Yeah, he's definitely softening the ground for what sounds like a very difficult budget in November.
Yeah. That seems to be the immediate context. His chancellor, Rachel Reeves, she's already been managing expectations, suggesting tax rises are, well, highly likely. She's pointing to global events, yes, but also the long-term damage to the economy, forcing harder choices.
So when Starmer says not cost-free, he's basically telling people, look, tax rises are probably coming. It's not our fault exactly. It's the situation we're inheriting. Is that about dodging blame later, or does it just confirm what critics say about labor and taxes?
Well, it's a really tricky line to walk, isn't it? And the analysis suggests it might be doing both things at once. Warning about pain now makes him look serious, fiscally responsible perhaps to the markets, shows discipline. But at the same time, it hands the opposition a huge stick to beat him with. They can use his own words, uncomfortable for our party, as proof labor always means higher taxes. It feels like pre-justifying austerity, maybe, but it definitely comes at a political cost right now. And we have to remember, this speech wasn't given in a vacuum. He's not exactly operating from a position of strength and calm right now. The sources make it clear he's under enormous pressure, which likely forced this big attempt to unify everyone around this vision right now.
Yeah, we saw that internal stuff bubbling up. The open challenge from Andy Burnham, the mayor of Greater Manchester. That felt like more than just a policy disagreement. That's questioning his authority, surely.
Oh, absolutely. Burnham's challenge matters because he's influential, represents a key part of the country for labor, but the instability seems deeper than just philosophical splits. The sources point to some really significant staff losses shaking things up in number 10.
Can you detail those? Because key people leaving, well, it suggests something more than just a reshuffle, maybe a need for a real change in direction.
Well, we saw the U.S. Ambassador Peter Mandelson go and his deputy Angela Rayner. That forced a big ministerial rejig. But perhaps more tellingly, the sources mention key aides inside Downing Street departing. It suggests Starmer might be scrambling a bit, trying to fix a communications strategy that, frankly, the sources say is struggling to cut through with swaths of the British public. When your message isn't landing, well, sometimes you change the messengers.
Okay, so the speech is doing two jobs at once then. Laying out the grand plan, yes, but also maybe a slightly desperate plea for unity from a leader who knows he's got problems in his own backyard.
That feels like exactly the tightrope he's walking. He needs to shore up his base now, because the sources suggest he's bracing for potentially deep and painful losses to Reform UK in those local elections coming up in May. Welsh, Scottish, English locals. The urgency is real. The sources even say many in his own party are privately pondering whether this could be his last Labour Party conference as Prime Minister. So, yeah, he is fighting for his political life as much as he's fighting for this national renewal idea.
Right, and given all that internal wobbling, maybe this strategy to go directly after Reform UK makes a bit more sense. He's trying to shift the focus, perhaps, away from Labour's own issues and onto this bigger, defining ideological battle, asking voters, even those not traditionally Labour, whose side are you actually on here?
And that battle quickly focused on immigration policy, didn't it? Starmer kicked off the conference calling Reform UK's deportation policy racist. I mean, straight out of the gate, making it very personal, forcing that debate right to the front.
Okay, let's try and lay out both sides of that specific argument fairly based on what the sources say.
Well, Starmer's using that language we talked about, decency versus division, framing it as a moral issue. But Reform UK's Zia Youssef pushed back hard, rejecting the racist label entirely. Their argument, aimed squarely at their supporters, is basically that Labour wants the UK to pay hundreds of billions for foreign nationals to live off the state forever. Reform's position, as stated, is that only British citizens should get welfare, and migrants need to contribute actively.
So it's a fundamental clash of worldviews, really. Starmer talking collective responsibility, decency. Reform talking national interest, contribution, individual responsibility, maybe sovereignty too.
Exactly, and it shows just how central the migration debate is across the board. It's also worth remembering, as the sources note, this isn't just a simple Labour versus Reform thing. You have figures like Mahmoud within the broader political discussion arguing migrants need to earn settlement rights. So the whole issue of migration, national identity, economic contribution, it's complex. Starmer's trying to boil it down to two clear opposing moral choices.
Okay, but to get the full picture of this moment, we need that third piece, the Conservative reaction. How did they respond to Starmer setting up this fork in the road, this supposed grand choice?
They essentially tried to blow the whole thing up, just dismiss the premise entirely. The Conservative Party chairman, Kevin Hollinrake, his argument was Starmer hasn't offered a fork in the road at all. He said Starmer's already driven Britain into a cul-de-sac of chaos. That's a pretty punchy counter-metaphor designed to just completely undermine Starmer's claim to be offering a visionary path forward.
And they went straight for the economic warnings Starmer himself had made, right?
Oh, absolutely. They jumped all over Rachel Reeves's warnings about likely tax hikes, calling her the doom loop chancellor. That phrase doom loop suggests a cycle Labour can't escape: tax, borrow, spend, decline, repeat. They accused her of planning to pile tax upon tax, debt upon debt, which they argued will just further grind the economy down and shatter the public's trust.
So the Conservatives are basically using Starmer's own careful warnings about hard choices against him, saying, see, this proves his whole vision is just reckless spending waiting to happen.
That's exactly the tactic. Hollinrake wrapped it up by calling Starmer a weak, visionless prime minister and saying Labour's heading for a race to the bottom. So they're trying to reframe the situation completely. Not a big choice between renewal and decline, just predictable, high-tax Labour causing problems, #, outro.
So let's pull this together for you. What we've seen here is Starmer making this huge, almost heroic pitch, invoking post-war rebuilding, asking for a mandate for national renewal, a really ambitious vision. But it's immediately weighed down by, well, the messy reality, internal party fights, those warnings about tax rises coming from his own chancellor,
Yeah.
and this very real, very potent challenge from Reform UK, which he's now trying to frame as the bad choice, the path of division.
Yeah, and if you connect the dots strategically, his big aim is clearly to try and unify the country. He's urging people to unite around a common good. But he's doing it from a position where, as we've seen, his own party's foundations feel a bit shaky right now. So the speech feels like an attempt to steady his own ship, define the fight on his terms, making the struggle seem necessary, noble even, rather than just political difficulty.
Which leaves us with a really interesting question for you to think about as all this plays out. Starmer says the goal is renewal, but he also warns the path is long. It requires tough decisions, uncomfortable ones for his party, decisions that might even lead to deep and painful losses in those upcoming elections. So here's the thought. At what point does a strategy that's presented as necessary for the long-term health of the country, at what point does that become just too politically risky? When does the cost of the vision potentially cost the leader their job? It's that ultimate tension, isn't it? Vision versus vulnerability.